In this video, I'm going to talk specifically about monitors. Monitors are an essential component to all of the solutions that we offer, such as cloud load balancing or DNS failover, because they are what we use to determine if your servers are available or are not available. You'll see I've logged into my portal here, and under the networking tab there's a monitors subtab, and also under cloud DNS there's a monitors subtab. All of the monitors within any of the solutions that you subscribe to are identical, and you can create them in any area and use them for any of your servers anywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead and look at them here in the networking tab. You'll see that I have 3 monitors already, and if I select one from the table here and click Edit, I can look at the particular settings for it. You'll see that this FTP monitor checks every 3 minutes, and if I click on the Special Parameters tab, it logs in with a specific username and password. So this monitor could be assigned probably and most definitely to an FTP server to log in and actually make sure that that server is available and online. I also have a ping monitor. We can double click that. Looks like it runs every 5 minutes. And I also have an SMTP monitor, and that checks every 1 minute. You'll see that I do not have a destination port specified in here, which is fine. You could put port 25 in there, but if you leave it blank, it'll use the standard port for that particular protocol. What I don't have is an HTTP monitor, and I need this for my web applications, so I'm going to go ahead and click Add on the toolbar and create one. Now, under the default monitors, you'll see that we have the 4 standard options there, and each of these have been configured here with some standard parameters, which you can certainly use, but I'm going to go ahead and click on Advanced Monitors, and then you'll see we have quite a number of additional options for you to choose from. I'm still going to choose just HTTP, and I'm going to give it a name here. And I'm going to explain all of these parameters just a little bit. The interval is how often does this monitor check the server that it's assigned to. Right now it would check every 3 minutes. I'm going to change that to check every 1 minute. The response timeout is how long, once it reaches out to that server, how long do you want it to wait? 30 seconds is quite a while for a web server to spit back a page, but you could certainly lower that. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at this particular setting. I'm going to go ahead and skip over to retries, and this is how many consecutive tests must this monitor do to determine the status of the server. So if it's checking every 1 minute, it needs to do 2 more tests for a total of 3 tests, or 3 minutes of downtime before it will mark the server as down. If you want the server to be marked as down sooner, I could drop this down to 1, or even if I was really a risk taker, I could drop it down to 0. But I really recommend having at least a confirmation test and leaving it at 1. I'll go back up to downtime. This is how much time you want to force a server to stay down. So let's say the monitor tests it. After 2 minutes, the server is definitely down. When do you want it to resume testing to check if it's going to come back online? Here, it's going to wait for 30 seconds before it resumes testing. You may very well want to force the server to stay down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or as long as you can imagine before bringing it back online. And this is the variable that you would use there. Success retries here is how many consecutive tests before considering the server back online. So with these settings here, it checks every minute. After 2 minutes, it will take the server down. It will then wait 30 seconds and then resume testing again. And after 3 consecutive positive tests, it will mark the server as back online. Over here on the right, you'll see there's a destination IP box. You probably don't want to put the IP address of your server in here. 99% of the time you really don't need that, because when you assign this monitor to a server, it will automatically use the IP address of that server and test against that. If you do put an IP in here, you're hard coding this monitor against a specific server. So then if you assign this monitor to a server with a different IP, keep in mind that the result it's getting back is actually from the server that is hard coded into this box. The destination port, again, if you could leave it blank and it would use the port that is common for that protocol, or you could type in the appropriate port, or you could enter a different port. Let's say my server was really behind port 8080, I could put that in there, but I'm just going to leave it here. And the other option I want to talk about is the custom header. For example, if I have multiple websites hosted behind a single static IP address, you most likely use host headers in order to actually pull that website out of the server. Often, if you just put an IP address into your browser, you don't get a website. You need to actually put that that host header in there. So here, because I am going to be testing a website that is hosted on a machine with multiple websites, I need to put in my host header. So I'm going to put example.com. That means when I assign this to a server, it's actually going to go to that server with the specific IP, but it's going to use example.com in the host header to allow my web server to actually deliver the correct site to me. And for example, I'm using Windows 2008 with IIS, and this is an essential component to make that website respond. Now there's one more thing I want to mention before I go to the Special Parameters tab. You'll notice in the monitor type here, you don't see HTTPS. And that's because it just uses a standard HTTP monitor, but you check off the secure box here at the bottom. And you'll notice that it changes the port to 443. Just keep that in mind if you do need an HTTPS monitor. The other thing to keep in mind with HTTPS is that if it goes to your web page and it gets a certificate error, that's fine. We've configured our system to ignore certificate errors for now. All right, Special Parameters tab. There are a couple of options here that are very critical to ensuring that this monitor properly detects the status of your server. The first one here is the HTTP request. You'll notice that it just has this head space slash here. The slash is really just the root. It symbolizes the root of your web application. So if I'm going to example.com, then it will just pull up the default web page that shows up there. If I wanted to specify another page or a directory, I could do that here. So I could put in a specific directory or folder and then my test page. So I could go to, I don't know, default.htm or anything that you wanted there. What a lot of people do is they create a specific web page and put it on their server that is just for monitoring purposes. And it might do a database check in the background or do some other type of test and then spit a word like OK or I'm up to the web page. And this allows you to test that specific page as opposed to the default page of your website. And the next option down below are the response codes. This is probably the most critical part of the monitor to ensure that we action on the correct response. Now if you go to a website, really what it's looking for here is the HTTP response code. It's not really looking for content on the page or anything like that. And if it comes back with the 200, it considers it's okay. 200 is definitely a positive response. Here you'll see there are a lot of other options that you can choose from. Not very typical for a web page to spit back another response and for it to be considered positive, but you certainly could choose that. For example, if that particular page, directory/default.htm, kicked back a 404, I could choose 404 here and add it. And now that would be considered a positive thing. I don't really want to do that. I consider a 404 actually a bad thing, so I'm going to remove it from there. But just look at the options here and consider them. Another thing to keep in mind is what if I go to example.com and it redirects to www.example.com. It might spit back a 301, so you might need to add a 301 in here as a positive code. Again, I don't really recommend that. What I would probably do is instead of then testing against example.com, which redirects to www.example.com, I would just go ahead and test www.example.com, unless the purpose of this monitor was specifically to see if the redirect was functioning. Trying to look a little bit more granularly at the actual website that you want to make sure is up. Now, how do I know that I'm going to get a 200 response code? That's the trick. I mean, typically if you go to the IP address that this server is assigned to with the host header and you get a page back, it's probably a 200. But there's a nice little tool out there that I have here in another tab called web-sniffer.net, and I can actually put in the IP address of my web server. So here I'll put in the IP that I'm actually going to assign and run a test against it. So if I hit click submit here, you'll see that it goes out and actually checks that web server, and then in a few seconds it comes back with a result. And there it is below, 200. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm looking for. So if I get a 200 on this little test site, I know that my monitor is going to get a 200, and then it's going to be a-okay. If I get a different response code here, I might get a 301. I've seen that fairly regularly. If you're testing a secure site, I might get a 403 because a login is required. So keep those things in mind. You could add those codes into the monitor as successful, or you could find another way to create a monitor that successfully tests your site without having to add additional response codes. So that's about it for my HTTP monitor. I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and now I can use that. In my configuration builder here, I can go ahead and assign it to one of my servers. I could pull up my server here. This one's down. Now I could go ahead and uncheck the SMTP and add the HTTP test and click Save. And in theory, if this was a real server, it would monitor that, and after the 2 minutes, it would come online. All right, so there's one more quick trick I want to show you for monitors. And instead of looking for an HTTP response code for a particular monitor, you could look for content on a page. So if I choose the HTTP ECV instead, you'll now see that instead of specifying response codes, I can look for a received string. So if I was going to my specific page, directory/testpage.htm, and let's say that page did a database check on the back end or a bunch of other things, and then it spat the word OK to the page, I could look for that word, OK. And if it's there, then this monitor will be considered up and online. If it's not there, it'll be considered down. So that's about it for my overview of monitors. Of course, if you need any help, we're always here 24/7. You can visit our support site at support.totaluptime.com. There's a knowledge base here that you can search, and you can also create a ticket here, and we're here 24/7 to help you. Thanks again for choosing Total Uptime.